Greetings, O denizens of YouTube. Welcome to this installment of Stupid Shit Feminists Say on TEDx Talks. Today's installment features a Colin Stokes, credited as a communications expert, and his lecture on the hidden meanings in kids' movies at TEDx Beacon Street.
You know, my favorite part of being a dad is the movies I get to watch. I love sharing my favorite movies with my kids, and when my daughter was 4, we got to watch The Wizard of Oz together. Totally dominated her imagination for months. Her favorite character was Glinda, of course. Gave her a great excuse to wear a sparkly dress and carry a wand. But you know, you watch a movie enough times, and you start to realize how unusual it is. Now, we live today and are raising our children in a kind of children's fantasy, spectacular industrial complex. But The Wizard of Oz stood alone. It did not start that trend. 40 years later was when the trend really caught on, with, interestingly, another movie that featured a metal guy and a furry guy rescuing a girl by dressing up as the enemy's guards.
Well, Chewbacca never dressed as anything, nor did R2-D2. But you know what? Never mind that. Where are Luke and Han Solo? Or at the very least, their equivalents.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Now, there's a big difference between these two movies, a couple of really big differences between The Wizard of Oz and all the movies we watch today. One is there's very little violence in The Wizard of Oz.
Very little violence. Really? Because I watched The Wizard of Oz, and the film pretty much starts off with an act of violence.
That dog's a menace to the community. I'm taking him to the sheriff and make sure he's destroyed.
Uncle Henry, Auntie Em, don't let him take Joe. Don't let him take him, please.
Let me
Stop first.
Put him in the basket, Henry.
Oh,
The idea.
oh, Uncle Henry. Oh, don't.
Well, granted, it was only attempted violence. And it was only against the dog. But if we apply these standards, the fact that Darth Vader was planning to kill Princess Leia could be dismissed as non-violent because in the end he didn't actually kill her. And how about the killing of the Witch of the East? An accident, to be sure, but Dorothy is being given full credit, lauded for it, and is in fact being celebrated as a person committing an act of violence against another person. And don't even get me started on the flying monkeys and the trees, which, oh, no, right, you mentioned them.
The monkeys are rather aggressive, as are the apple trees.
Brilliant. Using that logic, you can assert that just about any movie contains very little violence. Okay, let me try this. Star Wars contains very little violence. I mean, the Empire is very aggressive, and the Rebels, well, they're fighting for their freedom, so they're rather aggressive. But besides that, very little violence. You can't just say that the violent people in the movie don't count.
But I think if The Wizard of Oz were made today, the wizard would say, Dorothy, you are the savior of Oz that the prophecy foretold. Use your magic slippers to defeat the computer-generated armies of the Wicked Witch. But that's not how it happens. Another thing that's really unique about The Wizard of Oz, to me, is that all of the most heroic and wise and even villainous characters are female. Now, I started to notice this when I actually showed Star Wars to my daughter, which was years later, and the situation was different. At that point, I also had a son. He was only 3 at the time. He was not invited to the screening. He is too young for that. But he was the second child, and the level of supervision had plummeted. So he wandered in, and it imprinted on him like Mommy Duck does to its duckling. Is he picking up on the fact that there are only boys in the universe except for Aunt Beru? And of course, this princess who's really cool, but who kind of waits around through most of the movie so that she can award the hero with a medal and a wink to thank him for saving the universe, which he does by the magic that he was born with.
Really? Because I watched Star Wars too. And I remember Leia being a lot more...
What the hell are you doing?
Somebody has to save our skins. Into the garbage chute, flyboy.
What's the word? No, wait, it'll come to me.
I don't know who you are or where you came from. From now on, you do as I tell you, okay?
Look, your worshipfulness, let's get one thing straight. I take orders from just one person, me.
So one day you're still alive. Will somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way?
Oh, right, involved in her own escape, if not to say proactive in engineering said escape. As far as the wink goes, that was between Leia and Han, who had no special powers, and whose entire contribution to the final fight was a bit of flanking and some proper shooting. Oh, and by the way, it was Han winking.
Compare this to 1939 with The Wizard of Oz. How does Dorothy win her movie? By making friends with everybody and being a leader.
True enough. Well, except for the people she kills. But then again, the same is true of Luke. He's already friends with Obi-Wan. He befriends Leia. He gets the droids on his side. And he even manages to sway the ultimate mercenary Han Solo to join the fight. And let's not forget...
All wings report in.
Red 10 standing by.
Red 7 standing by.
Red 3 standing by.
Red 6 standing by.
Red 9 standing by.
Red 2 standing by.
Red 11 standing by.
Red 5 standing by.
that even in the final moments, he wasn't doing it alone. Yes, he made the kill shot, but he had a lot of backup without which he would never have made it to the moment of truth.
Like that's kind of the world I'd rather raise my kids in. Why is there so much force, capital F force, in the movies we have for our kids and so little Yellow Brick Road? I know from my own experience that Princess Leia did not provide the adequate context that I could have used in navigating the adult world that is co-ed.
What kind of weird-ass experience did you have that a woman holding her own against male adversaries and shouldering the same burden as her male compatriots would not provide you with the adequate context to navigate a world that is co-ed?
I think, there was a kind of first kiss moment when I really expected the credits to start rolling.
That's a bit odd. Why?
Because that's the end of the movie, right? I finished my quest, I got the girl. Why are you still standing there?
Are you kidding me? The quest in Star Wars was never to get the girl. It was to stop the Empire from becoming too powerful. And just to make this clear, nobody got no girl. I'm beginning to think you just weren't paying attention as you watched it.
The movies are very, very focused on defeating the villain and getting your reward, and there's not a lot of room for other relationships and other journeys.
Right. Well, you got me there.
Yeah, that's what she said when Big's in tank.
Where are you going?
Looks like I'm going nowhere. I have to go finish cleaning those droids.
Oh, and he can't stay here forever. Most of his friends have gone.
No, my father didn't fight in the wars. He was a navigator on a spice freighter.
That's what your uncle told you. He didn't hold with your father's ideals, thought he should have stayed here and not gotten involved.
All right. Well, take care of yourself, Han. But I guess that's what you're best at, isn't it?
Hey, Luke. May the Force be with you.
Then again, maybe not.
It's almost as though if you're a boy, you are a dopey animal, and if you were a girl, you should bring your warrior costume.
Wait, I thought you were in favor of strong female characters.
Another thing that's really unique about The Wizard of Oz to me is that all of the most heroic and wise and even villainous characters are female.
Make up your mind?
I mean, that is, there are plenty of exceptions, and I will defend the Disney princesses in front of any of you. But they do send a message to boys that the boys are not really the target audience.
Right. Well, actually, they are. The whole point of the goofy, loner, surly male characters is that they make a journey, and on that journey, they learn how to be better than themselves and how to put the greater good ahead of their own.
I mean, they are doing a phenomenal job of teaching girls how to defend against the patriarchy, but they are not necessarily showing boys how they're supposed to defend against the patriarchy.
Nor indeed against the dreaded flying spaghetti monster, which is just about as real as your freaking patriarchy.
There's no models for them.
Really? No role models. You just provided 3 of them. Alex, who learns how to overcome his beastly lion nature and eat fish instead of his friends. Shrek, who stops being such a recluse and a menace, and acquires friends and saves a princess. And the fairy tale kingdom. And Poe, who learns how to rise above his goofiness and saves the valley from Tai Long.
And we also have some terrific women who are writing new stories for our kids. And as three-dimensional and delightful as Hermione and Katniss are, these are still war movies.
And what better setting do you know for someone to be strong, capable, and brave?
And, of course, the most successful studio of all time continues to crank out classic after classic, every single one of them about the journey of a boy, or a man, or 2 men who are friends, or a man and his son, or 2 men who are raising a little girl.
Right. And as previously mentioned, they're all learning to sacrifice their own good for somebody else's.
Until, as many of you are thinking, this year, when they finally came out with Brave. I recommend it to all of you. It's on demand now. Do you remember what the critics said when Brave came out? Oh, I can't believe Pixar made a princess movie. Now, almost none of these movies pass the Bechdel test.
Yes, because it is a stupid test. And here's why.
Alison Bechdel is a comic book artist.
See, that right there should have been your first clue.
And back in the mid-'80s, she recorded this conversation she'd had with a friend about assessing the movies that they saw. And it's very simple. There's just 3 questions you should ask. Is there more than one character in the movie that is female who has lines? So try to meet that bar. And do these women talk to each other at any point in the movie? And is there conversation about something other than the guy that they both like?
Excellent. Now let's try to substitute the word women for something else, shall we? How about, well, I don't know, little people? So does the movie have more than one character in it that is a little person? And by the way, I dare you to try and meet that bar. Do these little people interact during the film? And do they talk about something other than the tall person they both like or dislike? No? Well, then I'm sorry, but this movie is clearly not worthy of our consideration, as just as clearly, it's heightist. How about obese people in the film? Or Native Americans? Or African Americans? Hell, just African people. Just how many societal demographics should movies contain to be considered worthy? In duplicate. Talking about something probably completely unrelated to the plot. No, seriously, I want to know.
Right? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Not to mention that the Bechdel test says nothing about the quality of the movie. Take The Shawshank Redemption, for example. It's a brilliant movie, and the only female character is a freaking bank teller. How about Fight Club? Doesn't pass the third criterion. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Same hurdle. Oh, and my favorite bit, The Silence of the Lambs. Excellent movie, with a female protagonist and a female senator. And it fails the freaking Bechdel test. I will say it again, it is a stupid test.
Two women who exist and talk to each other about stuff. It does happen. I've seen it. So let's look at the numbers. 2011, the 100 most popular movies. How many of them do you think actually have female protagonists? 11.
Well, I actually counted 28, but I will concede that it was less than 50.
But there is a number that is greater than this that's going to bring this room down. Last year, the New York Times published a study that the government had done. Here's what it said. 1 out of 5 women in America say that they have been sexually assaulted sometime in their life.
Now, what can I do against a government-run study? Oh, I know. Get an evaluation from a professional. Here's what Dr. Christina Hoff Sommers had to say about that survey.
The 1 in 5 rape figure comes from the National Intimate Partner in Sexual Violence Survey, released in 2011 by the Centers for Disease Control. The CDC survey reported that in the United States in 2010, approximately 1.3 million women were raped and an additional 12.7 million women and men were victims of sexual violence. But was it a clear picture? First of all, the agency's figures are wildly at odds with the official crime statistics. The Justice Department's annual crime survey, which is the gold standard in crime research, it reports that there were about 188,000 rapes and sexual assaults in 2010. Where did the CDC find more than 1 million and nearly 14 million victims of sexual violence that professional criminologists somehow overlooked? It found them by using a poorly constructed telephone survey with a low response rate and a non-representative sample of respondents. No one interviewed was asked if they had been raped or sexually assaulted. Instead of such straightforward questions, the CDC determined whether the responses indicated sexual violation.
Now, I don't think that's the fault of popular entertainment. I don't think kids' movies have anything to do with that.
Huh. Well, that's generous of you.
But something is going wrong. And when I hear that statistic, one of the things I think of is that's a lot of sexual assailants.
Interesting conclusion and completely false. Check out this report to the White House from the RAINN task force. It clearly states that rapists are a minority, with one doctor estimating that about 3% of the men on campus are responsible for about 90% of the rapes.
Who are these guys? What are they learning? What are they failing to learn? Are they absorbing the story that a male hero's job is to defeat the villain with violence and then collect a reward, which is a woman who has no friends and doesn't speak? Are we soaking up that story?
Right, because obviously no one but you has the capacity to differentiate between fiction and reality. God, I can't tell you how many things I've moved around the house using the Force.
You know, as a parent with the privilege of raising a daughter, like all of you who are doing the same thing, we find this world and this statistic very alarming, and we want to prepare them.
Well, since the statistic you quoted is wrong, you're basically preparing your children to live in a fantasy world. And you already admitted you are less invested in your second child. You know, I think parenting isn't your strong suit.
We have tools at our disposal like girl power, and we hope that that will help.
So it's not the movie's fault that the society is the way it is, but to fix it you are going to use movies. Can you not see your own inconsistency?
But I gotta wonder, is girl power gonna protect them if at the same time, actively or passively, we are training our sons to maintain their boy power?
Oh, I'm sorry. Now the movies are to blame for society's ills. Are you contradicting yourself on purpose, or did you just not review the speech before actually giving it?
And I'm talking mainly to the dads here.
So basically you're making an alternative upbringing appeal to the people most often removed from the upbringing process. That's logical and productive, I guess.
I think we have got to show our sons a new definition of manhood. Now, the definition of manhood is already turning upside down. I mean, you've read about how the new economy is changing the roles of caregiver and wage earner. They're throwing it up in the air.
No, it is not. It may be changing the assignment of these roles, but the roles themselves are staying pretty much the same. The wage earner goes out and earns that wage, and the caregiver stays home and gives care.
So our sons are going to have to find some way of adapting to this, some new relationship with each other. And I think we really have to show them and model for them how a real man is someone who trusts his sisters and respects them and wants to be on their team and stands up against the real bad guys who are the men who want to abuse the women.
As opposed to men who, upon hearing a woman's cry for help, will gather around to stand, look, and give helpful pointers on how to abuse her better? Where the hell have you grown up that was what you were taught? Where have you ever seen that happen? The fastest way to get yourself lynch mobbed today is to slap a woman in public. In the days of the duels, men have been killed for speaking improperly to a woman. Actually, forget speaking. Men have been killed for looking at a woman in a manner she didn't like. How is what you're proposing anything new? Also, why are we defining men by women? Especially if we live in the patriarchy?
And I think our job in the Netflix queue is to look out for those movies that pass the Bechdel test, if we can find them. And to seek out the heroines who are there, who show real courage, who bring people together, and to nudge our sons to identify with those heroines.
Sorry, what? Are you trying to get boys to trust girls and work with them? Or to get boys to become girls? Because that last sentence kind of suggests the latter.
And to say, I want to be on their team.
Oh, I see. You've confused identify with admire. It's an easy mistake to make.
Because they're going to be on their team. When I asked my daughter who her favorite character was in Star Wars, do you know what she said? Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Glinda. Now, what do these two have in common? I think these are the two people in the movie who know more than anybody else, and they love sharing their knowledge with other people to help them reach their potential.
It's interesting that you've reached that conclusion, because if Glinda had told Dorothy how the ruby slippers worked when they met in the Munchkin village, she could have gone home right then and there, rather than going halfway across Oz, get kidnapped, commit homicide, and make a nuisance of herself to the wizard. And if Luke knew that Darth Vader was actually his father, he might have gone off to find him, join the dark side, etc., etc., etc. So when I'm looking at Obi-Wan and Glinda, I tend to see two master manipulators. Puppet masters, if you will. Admittedly, their manipulations have benefited the greater good, but at some serious cost to the protagonist.
Now, they're leaders.
No, they are not. Glinda hasn't done squat but giggle and be cryptic, and Obi-Wan, while being more active, was more mentor and bodyguard to Luke than a leader.
I like that kind of quest for my daughter, and I like that kind of quest for my son. I want more quests like that. I want fewer quests where my son is told, go out and fight it alone, and more quests where he sees that it's his job to join a team.
Seriously, you just weren't paying attention when you watched the movies. Both movies, the message was, you have to do it. As in, the protagonist was supposed to get the job done. That they gathered a team around them was chance and their own character. Well, actually, in Star Wars, Luke joins the rebellion, something larger than himself. Whereas in The Wizard, the story is still about Dorothy and her quest to get home. The other characters are there because the way to get their desires coincides with Dorothy's. Otherwise, they'd be off on the sidelines doing God knows what.
Maybe a team led by women to help other people become better and be better people, like the Wizard of Oz. Thank you.
Right. I'm not sure what to call that, but communication expertise it certainly was not. So the elephant is leaving the room now. Solo.